So many players really struggle with the tactical side of the game. So in this intermediate match analysis, we're going to look at three main areas. We're going to look at how you should take the net, getting to net properly, how you can keep the net and using your bandeja to keep that net, and then thirdly, how to avoid that really frustrating area on the court called no man's land. So when it comes to taking the net, these are some really common errors that we see with players all over the world at this level. So we'll look at a couple of bad examples and then we'll look at a good example of how they've done it correctly. So here we're going to see a couple of really common bad examples. The first is the lob not being effective enough and players still coming forward. You see here the lob wasn't deep enough, they sprinted into no man's land and got a little bit stuck. They need that lob to go over. The other error is to come rushing forward like this, chipping and charging and forcing your way to net. We're going to see another example of this where they're forced back, and again, they end up stepping just onto that service line in no man's land and they're trying to rush by hitting through their opponents and coming forward after a volley like that. And it's just not a very effective way to do it. They should do what they're going to do here, which is lob over the heads, come all the way to the net position and then maintain that net position. Now at this end, you can see that they're hitting some nice bandejas and keeping that net position. Yes, they could probably do with just coming up a little bit more and getting out of no man's land, but they're doing a good job of forcing their opponents back and not rushing the point here. So that's what you've got to try and combine when coming forward. Without a doubt, these are two of the most common errors when trying to take the net. The first is hitting a lob and sprinting forward regardless of the depth of that lob or how high it is and things like that. It needs to be effective if you want time to come forward. If you don't have enough time to come forward, then you can't get in a good enough position and therefore you get stuck. The other is that players are chipping, charging, rushing forward, trying to hit past their opponents, and that's not very effective, particularly if your opponents are good volleyers. Yeah? So you want to make sure that you choose a good time to come forward, and then you've got plenty of time for you and your partner to get in a good position, and therefore you can attack the net. Now we're going to have a little look at the bandeja and good ways to actually keep the net position once you've got there. So we'll start with a few bad examples and then finish with a good example. And it basically comes down to recovering the net after the bandeja. If you've been forced back and you do decide to hit an overhead, you really should try and keep that net position. And here you can see falling back, hasn't had enough time to get forward again, potentially hit the bandeja a little bit too hard and therefore didn't give himself enough time. We'll see another example of this where the lob goes up, they come back, hit the bandeja and stay behind the service line, and you can see his partner now is then stuck and forced to come back, and therefore they've turned quite an attacking position into a defensive position. So you've got to make sure if you hit that bandeja, you've got to come forward. And here again, you know, that happened immediately after the serve. You've got to make sure that you come all the way in. It really comes down to hitting the right speed of the bandeja. This is a nice shot down the middle. Here he's forced back with a backhand and again hasn't recovered the net. A lot of it comes down to ball watching. Yeah, if you watch your ball instead of moving fast into position, then that's where you really struggle. Here there's a couple of good bandejas from the other side. The players come forward into a good net position. Again, a bandeja and staying in no man's land. And he's turned what could be quite an attacking position into defense. And we're keeping the arrow on him here because these next 3 or 4 shots are all opportunities for him to come forward and join his partner, but he's staying in that back position. Therefore, his partner has to come back and they get a little bit stuck. Now we'll look at some good examples here. Good bandeja, recovering that net position. Really from both sides on the pair at this end. Nice soft bandejas. Even that one, it's pretty deep, but he's bought himself time to come back to the net afterwards and still able to get up and volley that next ball. And a lot of the time, it's about being patient from this net position, like that exactly. Nice soft bandeja down the middle, control the point, and eventually you'll end up on top. So you can see there's a few main reasons why you want to hit your bandeja and recover the net. The first is obviously the net is the more dominant position to be on the court, so that's where you want to be. But also your partner then is not forced to come back out of position with you, or you're not split, leaving a big gap down the middle of the court. So if you go back and your intention is to hit an overhead, to hit a bandeja, then make sure you try and recover the net. And to do that, you might need to hit a little bit softer to buy yourself time to get back up to that net position. And there we saw some good examples of not coming back up and therefore getting a little bit stuck in no man's land, and you and your partner are out of position. And we also saw at the end there a good example of hitting soft bandejas, recovering the net. And maybe you might have to hit 4 or 5 of those in a point before you get an opportunity to finish. Now we're going to have a little look at no man's land and how we should be transitioning through that area to stay in a good tactical position on the court. So here we're going to look at a few examples of what not to do and how not to get into no man's land, and then we will look at a good way to go through it. So here it's really from, this position coming forward after a lob and just not going all the way up to your net position. And that is very easy to do, and a lot of players do it subconsciously. Here again, it's just taking a couple of steps in front of that line for not really any reason other than the fact that you've got caught up in the game and you're just not watching where the ball is and your own position. So here we're going to see, again, just kind of standing in that position at the back. In your mind, you're thinking that you're taking advantage in the point, but actually you're getting yourself into a difficult position. And here you can see the player has stayed in that position and now they have a ball around their feet, whereas otherwise they could probably either defend it from the back or block it from the front. And again, we're looking at this, making sure that you go all the way through that zone. And here's a couple of good examples. Here you can see the ball went past and he sprinted all the way up to that second post and slightly in front, and therefore allowed his partner time. We'll see another example here. Chiquita to the feet, come right forward and attack that ball. So when it comes to no man's land, the 2 most common ways of going into that zone are, like we saw a few examples there, from the back of the court, just subconsciously wandering in or taking a couple of steps in, thinking you're taking advantage in the point when actually really you're putting yourself and your partner slightly out of position. The other option is when your opponent lobs and you move back to hit your bandeja and you're not recovering. And we saw that earlier in this video, a few examples of that. And those are really the 2 most common ways, either from the net position moving back into no man's land or from the back position kind of wandering forward. A really good way to practically kind of test this when you're playing is just to reference where you start the point at and where you finish the point at. So if you're serving, for example, you want to reference that you're going to be at that second post or 1 step in front for the beginning of the point. And at the end of the point, check where you are. And if you're standing in no man's land, you need to analyze how you actually got into that zone. And you might be one of those players who more commonly moves in from the back or more commonly doesn't recover after a bandeja. And if this is the case, then that is your area to focus on. So you can see from these clips, the lob and the bandeja are such important shots when it comes to playing your matches, and that's why we've put them in our player package. We've actually got a player package of 5 different videos, which are not on our YouTube channel, which are basically what we consider the pillars of your paddle performance. I'll put that link down there, but there you can go and access that for free, and it will help you improve your game. I will also put a link down in the description for these Padel School hoodies and t-shirts, because a lot of people have been asking us about them and these high quality sports kit. And then I'll also put a playlist of other match analysis videos up on this side so you can see more of these.